The woman in seat 11C, Clarissa Monroe, if I remember the name correctly from her boarding pass at the security gate, had just pressed the call button with a hand that trembled ever so slightly. Not much, but enough to make me look up. Emily, the flight attendant in charge of our cabin, turned back toward her. Her face maintained its professional composure, but the smile she'd worn earlier was gone. "Is there anything else you need, Miss Monroe?" Her voice was soft, but there was a new tension beneath it. Clarissa tilted her head slightly, adjusting her posture like someone slipping into an unfamiliar role. "I'd like to speak with the head attendant. Or the captain, if possible." The air around us seemed to drop a degree, as if the entire plane had held its breath. Across the aisle, Malik Jordan, the young black man I'd noticed earlier in line for his quiet stillness, looked up for the first time. He closed his laptop, placed his hands calmly on his lap, said nothing, reacted to nothing, just looked. His eyes weren't accusatory, they weren't fearful, they were simply steady and waiting. A chill crept into my chest. I could feel what was coming. Emily furrowed her brow. "May I ask why, ma'am?" Clarissa glanced down briefly, then looked up again. Her eyes shimmered with a vague emotion. Anxious? Performative? Panicked? Hard to tell. "I just don't feel safe." 4 words. One short sentence, but it was as though someone had reached into the chest of every nearby passenger and squeezed tight. The older man in the row behind her looked up slightly. The woman by the window gripped her plastic cup harder. No one said anything, and we all knew no one needed to, because everyone understood exactly who Clarissa Monroe was really talking about and why. Clarissa Monroe strode through Gate D27 of Dallas-Fort Worth Airport with the poise of someone well acquainted with the first-class world. Her light gray suit was crisply pressed without a single crease, and her designer handbag glided effortlessly across the polished tile floor. For Clarissa, a first-class flight to Washington, D.C. wasn't a luxury. It was routine. She took this route dozens of times a year, for work, meetings, fundraising galas. Everything followed a script. Early boarding, the first glass of champagne and a quiet seat, to read briefings. But this time, as she stepped into the first-class cabin and approached seat 2A, a small detail made her pause. The man seated beside it. He was black, dressed in a navy blue suit, a white-collared shirt, and had a laptop open on the tray table. A pair of thin-rimmed glasses lay next to his iPhone. He looked like a businessman, but not the kind Clarissa was used to seeing in row 2. She frowned. Not because he had done anything wrong, just because something didn't match the setting. She couldn't explain it, or maybe the truth was she didn't want to. Clarissa took her seat in 2B with a quiet exhale, setting down her bag with more force than necessary. The man didn't look up. He stayed focused on his screen as if reading a confidential report. She glanced over. No greeting, no smile, no acknowledgement. That struck her as odd. And then, almost reflexively, she turned and spoke. "Excuse me, are you sure you're in the right seat?" The man looked up, calm and composed. "Yes," he said plainly, and returned to his screen. Clarissa furrowed her brow. No explanation. No ticket shown. No hint of uncertainty like she had expected. Leaning back slightly, she raised her hand to flag down a nearby flight attendant. Emily, the lead first-class attendant, approached with a professional smile. "How may I help you, ma'am?" Clarissa returned a polite smile. "I believe there might be a mix-up. This gentleman may be in the wrong seat." Emily checked her tablet, scanning the manifest. "Seat 2B is indeed assigned to Mr. Malik Jordan. Everything matches." Clarissa hesitated. "Oh, strange. I thought—" She stopped herself. Emily maintained her polite tone. "If there's anything else you need, I'll be happy to assist." Clarissa gave a small nod and turned to the window, but her composure was a veneer. Something felt out of place, and for Clarissa Monroe, a woman who believed that position defined worth, That was unacceptable. Clarissa Monroe sat stiffly, hands clasped tightly in her lap, eyes fixed on the headrest in front of her. The surrounding sounds, the opening of overhead bins, suitcase wheels rolling down the aisle, the laughter of children, suddenly felt distant and irrelevant. She couldn't focus. Everything narrowed down to one simple fact. The man beside her was still sitting there, perfectly calm, as if nothing had happened. She glanced over again. Malik Jordan didn't even register her presence. He was typing on his laptop, one Bluetooth earbud in, his eyes steady and unfazed. What unsettled Clarissa wasn't his silence. It was his refusal to soften his presence. No flattery, no apology for simply sitting in his assigned seat. And that was what bothered her most. Not that he had done anything wrong, but that he didn't seem to know his place. She pressed the call button. A soft chime sounded above her. Emily, the flight attendant, returned, still wearing that professional smile. "Is there anything I can help you with, Miss Monroe?" Clarissa leaned slightly toward her, lowering her voice so others wouldn't hear. "I'd like to change seats." Emily paused, her brow furrowing slightly. "Are you uncomfortable? Is there an issue with the seat?" Clarissa hesitated for a beat. "Not exactly the seat. I just don't feel entirely comfortable sitting here." "Perhaps if there's another seat available in first class?" Emily looked down at her tablet. "Let me check." She swiped through the seating chart, quietly counting rows. "I'm sorry, first class is fully booked today. However, there are some open seats in economy if you truly feel the need to move." Clarissa's eyes snapped up, stunned. "You mean I'd have to move to coach?" Emily kept her tone neutral. "Yes, that would be the only available option at this time." Clarissa inhaled sharply. "No, I suppose I'll stay." Her voice was clipped, but restrained. Amélie nodded. "If you need anything else, please let me know." Clarissa turned back to her seat, lips pressed tight. She was used to making requests and having them granted. But now, no one accommodated her. No one sided with her, and the man beside her, still calm, still unmoved, as if this was nothing. His silence felt like a mirror, reflecting her unease, her entitlement, and something deeper she didn't want to name, and that made it impossible for her to sit still. She pressed the call button again. This time her hand trembled slightly. Emily returned. This time her smile was thinner. "Is there anything else I can assist you with, Ms. Monroe?" Clarissa adjusted her posture, her voice calm but deliberate. "I'd like to speak with the head flight attendant. Or the captain, if possible." The space around them seemed to pause for a breath. For the first time, Malik Jordan looked up fully. He closed his laptop, set his hands neatly on his lap. He didn't speak, didn't react, just watched, calm but expectant. Emily's brows drew together. "May I ask why?" Clarissa looked down briefly, then up again, her eyes trying to convey an ambiguous sense of unease. "I just don't feel safe." 4 words, 1 sentence, but it was enough to cast a heavy silence over the entire cabin. The phrase, "I don't feel safe," wasn't loud, but it exploded in the cabin like an emergency signal. Some passengers turned their heads. A few slowed down in fastening their seatbelts. Some raised their eyebrows. Others lowered their faces, but their eyes still glanced toward Clarissa. Emily stood still for a moment, her lips pressed together, as if she were choosing words carefully to maintain professionalism. "Could you please elaborate, Miss Monroe? In what way do you feel threatened?" Clarissa looked up, meeting Malik's eyes. The man she had just implied was dangerous, but his gaze made her falter. It wasn't hostile, it wasn't mocking, just silent, steady, and unyielding. She turned away, her voice softening. "I'm not saying I feel threatened, just uncomfortable, unable to relax." Emily understood. Clarissa didn't need to say it outright. Everything was clear. A male passenger wearing Bluetooth headphones in the opposite row muttered, half mockingly, "Here we go again." A young female passenger nearby picked up her phone, tilting it as if texting, but the camera was clearly aimed at Clarissa. The atmosphere grew heavy. Emily spoke, this time in a lowered tone, but no longer soft. "Ms. Monroe, I must reiterate there are no available seats in first class. If you still wish to change seats, I can arrange one in economy class." Clarissa blinked. Malik's silence was becoming deafening. He didn't react, didn't defend himself, didn't argue. And that made her feel exposed. She glanced over, her voice now shaky as she tried to maintain dignity. "Then, would he move down instead?" A moment of stunned silence filled the cabin. The statement landed like a cold slap in winter. Emily took a deep breath. "I'm sorry, but I cannot ask another passenger to vacate their assigned seat simply because you're uncomfortable. That doesn't align with our policies, and frankly, it's not fair." Clarissa flushed. "So, I'm not allowed to feel safe?" Malik slowly closed his laptop. He turned, his gaze still remarkably calm. He reached into his suit jacket, pulling out a black leather wallet, and opened it gently. A golden badge gleamed. FBI. A held breath, a slow blink, a silence bordering on reverence. Malik spoke, his voice not loud, but each word clear. "Ms. Monroe, if you feel unsafe, I can take your statement right here, but providing false information to a federal agent carries legal consequences." Clarissa froze. The color drained from her face. She tried to speak, but her throat tightened. The cabin air thickened like fog. The young woman filming lowered her phone but didn't stop recording. Other passengers whispered, exchanging looks as if witnessing a pivotal moment. Emily nodded slightly, stepping back, as if relieved of a burden. Malik said nothing more. He tucked the badge away, reopened his laptop, and resumed his work. Clarissa sat there, no longer angry, no longer demanding, just silent, and for the first time, truly unsettled. Clarissa Monroe sat motionless, back pressed against the seat, hands clasped tightly on her lap, but her fingers trembled slightly. She no longer looked at Malik. She avoided everyone's gaze, her eyes fixed on the curtain separating first class from the cockpit, as if staring long enough could reverse time. But time only moves forward, and it's doing so at the speed of the internet. In the row behind, the young woman, no longer pretending, typed rapidly on her phone. A short caption appeared on the screen. "Woman tries to eject black passenger from first class until he flashes FBI badge." The video lasted less than a minute, but that was enough. Clarissa heard the ding, signaling the plane's impending departure. The pilot announced the flight details. She heard nothing. The only sounds in her mind were her racing heartbeat and the buzzing of her phone in her handbag. She didn't dare take it out. Malik, on the other hand, remained composed, as if he hadn't just been falsely accused, threatened, or insulted because of his skin color. He focused on his screen, occasionally typing brief notes, perhaps composing an email or report. He said nothing to Clarissa, no glances, no anger, no satisfaction. That, more than anything, made her feel insignificant. A few rows ahead, a middle-aged man whispered to his wife, not bothering to lower his voice. "Hard to believe this still happens in 2025. His wife nodded. At least this time it was immediately addressed. She heard every word and knew they were talking about her. She tried to swallow a retort, but there was nothing to say. She had been exposed. Not in secret, but in front of dozens. And a camera. Her phone buzzed again, once, twice, 3 times, messages, calls, perhaps from friends, family, colleagues, or worse, superiors, media, the outside world, where social media never sleeps. She closed her eyes, told herself that once the plane landed, this would all blow over. People would move on. They'd be occupied with work, family, bigger news. This little incident would fade away, but she knew in this era, nothing is little once it's online, especially when it reveals your true character so unmistakably. Clarissa Monroe sat frozen, her back pressed firmly against the seat, hands clasped tightly in her lap, but her fingers trembled ever so slightly. She no longer looked at Malik. She didn't look at anyone. Her eyes were locked on the curtain separating first class from the cockpit, as if staring long enough might somehow reverse time. But it wouldn't. Time only moves forward. And now, it moves at the speed of the internet. In the row behind her, the young woman, no longer pretending to be doing anything else, was typing furiously on her phone. A short caption appeared on her screen: "Woman tries to remove black passenger from first class until he flashes FBI badge." The video was less than a minute long, but it was enough. Clarissa heard the ding signaling the plane's imminent departure. The pilot's voice came over the speaker, announcing the flight details. She heard none of it. The only sounds in her head were the pounding of her heart and the buzzing of her phone inside her handbag. She didn't dare take it out. Malik, on the other hand, was calm, as if he had not just been accused, threatened, or humiliated simply for the color of his skin. He focused on his screen, occasionally typing a few short lines, perhaps drafting an email or a report. Not a word to Clarissa, not a glance, no anger, no smugness, and that, more than anything, made her feel small. A few rows ahead, a middle-aged man leaned toward his wife and whispered, not even bothering to lower his voice, "Can't believe this still happens in 2025. His wife nodded. At least this time it was shut down immediately. She heard every word, and she knew they were talking about her. She tried to swallow a response, but there was nothing to say. She had been exposed, not in the shadows, but in front of dozens of people, and the phone in her purse buzzed again. Once, twice, 3 times, messages, calls, maybe from friends, family, co-workers, or worse, her superiors, the press, the outside world, where the internet never sleeps. She closed her eyes, told herself it would blow over when the plane landed. People would forget. They'd get busy with work, family, bigger headlines. This little incident would fade, but she knew in this age, nothing is little once it's online, especially when it reveals who you are in a way that cannot be denied. As the plane touched down on the runway at Reagan National Airport, Clarissa gripped her handbag like it was the last shield between her and the outside world. Malik remained silent. He closed his laptop, removed his earbuds, and stood up as the seatbelt sign turned off. Not hurried, not slow, a calmness that Clarissa could only envy. She stood as well, eyes avoiding every glance around her. Passengers gathered their belongings, some pretending not to know anything, but their eyes said otherwise. The middle-aged man pursed his lips and let out a low whistle, like someone who had just watched a dramatic ending. The young woman who had filmed the incident smiled down at her phone, as if checking the number of views climbing by the minute. Clarissa discreetly unlocked her phone. Notifications flooded the screen. "Clarissa, what the hell did you do? That video of you is blowing up on Twitter. Please tell me. That's not you." One of the missed calls was from Tracy Ellison, director of communications at the nonprofit where Clarissa had long been one of the public faces. She felt like the ground beneath her was still trembling, even though the plane had stopped moving. As she exited the jet bridge, she hoped to blend into the crowd. But no. Just a few steps from baggage claim, a reporter's voice rang out. "Ms. Monroe, do you have any comment on the video going viral online?" Her heart skipped. It had made the news. 2 reporters, a cameraman, a microphone with a local network's logo, and a few curious onlookers gathered quickly. Clarissa turned away, trying to stay composed, walking faster. But the cameras had caught her face, the angle of shame. She couldn't outrun the fear chasing her. Outside the airport, as she opened the door to her taxi, her phone buzzed again. Caller, Diane Riley, chair of the board of Empower Together. Clarissa swallowed hard. Empower Together, the organization where she was the deputy executive director, specialized in social equity, diversity, and community inclusion. She couldn't ignore the call. "Clarissa." Diane's voice was cold and firm. "We need your resignation submitted by 10 a.m. tomorrow. And please refrain from making any public statements until our official press release is issued." Clarissa opened her mouth to respond, but Diane had already hung up. No room for argument. No space left for explanation. She sat silently in the car as the world outside moved on like nothing had happened. But in Clarissa Monroe's world, every brick of her reputation was crumbling, each piece falling straight into the internet's hands, and no one reaching out to catch them. The taxi turned down a quiet street, leaving the airport and the media storm behind. Clarissa leaned her head against the window, streetlights blurring in her vision. She didn't cry, not because she was strong, but because the shock hadn't yet allowed the tears to fall. Her phone buzzed for the 10th time in 5 minutes. She didn't check it anymore. Messages, notifications, mentions, media alerts. A digital wildfire was consuming the name Clarissa Monroe. Her Twitter account had been flagged. A stranger had posted, "This is Clarissa Monroe, deputy director of an equality organization who tried to eject a black man from first class. This is the equality she preaches." Attached was the video, nearly 2 million views. Hashtags like "Privilege in Action," "Do Better Clarissa," and "This is Why We Fight" were skyrocketing to the top of. A social scandal blog had already published a frame-by-frame analysis of her expression, her tone, her every word. No one asked what she had been thinking, they only needed to see. By the time she arrived at her Georgetown apartment, Clarissa nearly ran into the elevator. Neighbors didn't acknowledge her, or pretended not to. Either way, her face was in the headlines now. Inside, the apartment was as quiet and orderly as always, everything neat, polished, just like the reputation she once held. But now, every wall seemed to echo her words. "I don't feel safe," over and over again. She sank to the floor, coat still on. Only one question looped in her mind. Why did I do that? Yes, Malik had done nothing wrong. Yes, she hadn't truly felt threatened, but in that moment, seeing him, his calm gaze, his unwavering silence, Clarissa felt exposed. She felt defeated. And instead of confronting that feeling, she reacted with the only weapon society had taught her. Power can turn discomfort into danger. But this time, that power turned on her. And for the first time in her life, she understood what it felt like to be swallowed by prejudice, wielded by the very tool she had once believed herself immune to. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains as if the world outside remained untouched by the storm Clarissa was drowning in. She sat at the kitchen table, a cup of cold coffee in front of her. On her laptop screen was an email from the board of the organization where she served as deputy director. "We regret to request that Ms. Monroe temporarily step back from all public lacing duties while the recent incident is under review." Temporarily. A word that sounded light but felt hollow. She knew it was the beginning of a deeper cut, a polite way of saying, "Disappear quietly." Clarissa sat motionless, her hand gripping the mouse as if trying to hold on to something already slipping away. On the other side of the screen, social media continued to circulate the video, accompanied by cutting captions. Years of justice work undone in 30 seconds. The world doesn't need more apologies, it needs awareness. And then, something Clarissa didn't expect. An email from an unfamiliar address. malik.stone@doj.gov. Just one line. "If you'd like to talk, I'm willing to listen." Clarissa read it again and again. A part of her wanted to press delete, ignore it, block it. Not out of anger, but out of fear of facing herself. But for the first time since that moment on the plane, she felt conscience. Not to erase the mistake, but to understand why it happened. She replied simply, "I don't know if I deserve this conversation, but if your offer still stands, I'd like to listen." She hit send, then exhaled, a real breath, the first in hours. Clarissa knew an apology wouldn't be enough. but genuine listening might be the first step. The next afternoon, Clarissa Monroe stepped into a small cafe on F Street in D.C. No assistant, no sunglasses to hide behind, just a 49-year-old woman, exhausted and utterly honest. Malik Stone was already seated at a table by the window, a simple black suit, gray tie. No laptop, no documents, just a cup of black tea and a pair of observant eyes. Sharp, but not judgmental. Clarissa paused at the table, slightly hesitant. "I don't know where to begin," she said quietly. Malik gestured to the seat across from him. "Sit down. This isn't a hearing." She did, avoiding his gaze. "I know what I did was wrong. And I know it wasn't the first time I looked at someone and let bias lead the way. I have no excuse." Malik gave a small nod, still silent. She continued, voice unsteady. "I thought if I explained, if I told you what kind of person I am, maybe you'd see I didn't mean any harm." Malik set down his tea. At last he spoke, slowly but not coldly. "You know, Clarissa, you're not the first to think politeness is enough to hide prejudice." She looked up, eyes beginning to gloss over. Malik continued, "I've worked in federal service for 12 years. I've sat in meetings with people just like you, well-spoken, philanthropic, speaking publicly about justice. But when I walk into a room without my badge, their eyes are a silent indictment." Clarissa's voice cracked. "I didn't think. I wasn't that kind of person," he cut in, calm but firm. "You didn't think. That's the problem." The words sliced cleanly. She lowered her head. Malik's voice softened but not weakened. "I didn't come here for an apology. I came because I want to know, what are you going to do with this lesson?" Clarissa met his eyes for the first time. "I can't undo what I did, but I can start by stopping the talking and start listening, not to be forgiven, but to understand why I need to change." A long silence passed. Malik nodded. "Slowly? Good, because next time not everyone will have the patience to sit across from you like this." Clarissa pressed her lips together, eyes reddening. Malik stood, picked up his coat. "Thank you for showing up," he said, then walked away. Without looking back, she remained there, alone with the echo of the conversation. Not an ending, but the beginning of a difficult and necessary journey inward. "I've worked in federal service for 12 years. I've sat in meetings with people just like you, well-spoken, philanthropic, speaking publicly about justice. But when I walk into a room without my badge, their eyes are a silent indictment." Clarissa's voice cracked. "I didn't think. I wasn't that kind of person," he cut in, calm but firm. "You didn't think. That's the problem." The words sliced cleanly. She lowered her head. Malik's voice softened but not weakened. "I didn't come here for an apology. I came because I want to know, what are you going to do with this lesson?" Clarissa met his eyes for the first time. "I can't undo what I did, but I can start by stopping the talking and start listening, not to be forgiven, but to understand why I need to change." A long silence passed. Malik nodded. "Slowly? Good, because next time not everyone will have the patience to sit across from you like this." Clarissa pressed her lips together, eyes reddening. Malik stood, picked up his coat. "Thank you for showing up," he said, then walked away. Without looking back, she remained there, alone with the echo of the conversation. Not an ending, but the beginning of a difficult and necessary journey inward. 3 days later, Clarissa Monroe stepped onto a pale gray draped wooden platform in a small university auditorium in D.C. It wasn't a press conference. There was no PR assistant guiding her in, just a community forum, a single microphone, a row of folding chairs, and unflinching stares that didn't need to hide their meaning. Behind her hung a sign in bold letters: "Discourse, Privilege, Prejudice, and the Things We Don't Dare to Say." She had been invited, not because people were eager to hear her speak, but because they wanted to see whether she had the courage to listen to her own voice. Clarissa stood there without notes, without a slide deck. She took the microphone in hand, her grip steadier than it had been 3 days ago. "I'm Clarissa Monroe. I was once one of the women invited to speak on gender equity, on diversity and inclusion at the organization where I served as a director. And I was also the woman on that flight, the one who tried to use her sense of discomfort to get a man removed from his seat, simply because I didn't understand that his silence was a strength, not a threat." The room was silent. No phone buzzes, no typing. Every eye was on her. I used to think prejudice looked like shouting slurs, like cruel words hurled in anger. But I've since learned that sometimes prejudice is a glance over the shoulder, a wordless suspicion, a polite tone masking a silent judgment. She paused, took a breath, and continued. "I'm not standing here to ask for forgiveness. I'm standing here because I won't hide anymore. I've lost a lot, my reputation, my title, the trust of people I once worked alongside, and maybe I won't ever get those things back. But I have regained this, the truth. The truth that I was not the victim in my own story, and that a woman like me, if she refuses to confront her own mistakes, will only keep repeating them under a thicker and more dangerous veneer of virtue." A student in the front row, brown skin, shaved head, hoodie, nodded slowly. "Clarissa saw it. She saw everything. If you're sitting here thinking you've never done what I did, I ask you to look again, because sometimes the worst thing we do isn't what we say or do. It's the silence we keep in the face of prejudice, even when we know it's wrong." She placed the microphone down, not waiting for applause. She bowed her head briefly, then stepped off the stage. A line of students silently parted to let her pass. No one took a photo, no one whispered. There was only one thing left, louder than any ovation. The truth was no longer hidden.